So just like we discussed that every cyber kill chain has a specific number of stages or steps, similarly, the incident response lifecycle also comprises of a number of stages or steps. So the first phase is preparation. In this phase, we basically prepare a documented response plan, and we have incident response teams with well-defined roles and responsibilities. And these teams are also responsible for conducting mock drills. The next phase is identification. In this phase, the incident response teams tries to identify whether an event is an actual incident or is it a benign event. So in order for them to determine if it's a security incident, there are certain indicators of compromise that they have to look for. So the next phase is containment. In this phase, we're basically focusing on how to contain the spread of the infection. We try to disconnect compromised devices from the network and possibly identify any additional systems that have been compromised. The next phase is eradication. In this phase, we try to determine and address the root cause of the breach, and we remove the malware or vulnerability from the affected systems. After eradication, we move on to the recovery phase. In the recovery phase, we try to restore systems and data from backups. We restore business operations and monitor for signs of recurring breach. And we also add indicators of compromise to our security tools so that these don't happen again. And finally, but very important, is the lessons learned phase. In this, we review why the breach happened and what could have prevented it. And then we take steps to make sure that a similar breach doesn't happen ever again. Now let's delve into each of these steps one by one. So the first is the preparation phase. The most important part of the incident response lifecycle is being prepared before an incident actually happens. Without proper preparation, even the best response team will struggle to contain and mitigate threats effectively. So the first thing that we need is an incident response plan. Every organization needs a well-documented incident response plan that outlines how incidents will be handled. It's supposed to clearly define roles and responsibilities of the team, the processes to detect, escalate, contain, and eradicate threats, and finally, incident management forms to document every step of the response. They also need to conduct regular mock drills, tabletop exercises, and red team engagements to know that everyone knows their role in case of an attack. The IR team must have quick access to laptops and forensic hardware, scanning and forensic tools for evidence collection, and they should also have checklists to ensure that nothing is missed during an investigation. Being well prepared ensures that incidents are handled quickly and efficiently, minimizing damage and reducing downtime. So what this basically means is that our response should not be a reactive one. That, if there is an actual security incident and then, we try to find out what's going on. We should have a dedicated team with roles, responsibilities, correct tools, and everything in place so that they're ready in case anything happens. So imagine a ransomware attack hits your company. If your IR team has a clear plan, the right tools, and a well-trained team, they can respond within minutes instead of hours, reducing the damage significantly. The next phase that we are going to discuss is identification. So the key point here is that a lot of the times there could be events which are not necessarily security incidents. So how do we decide whether a security event is an actual security incident? So event could be something very benign, but security incident has more malicious intent. So there are a couple of things that IR teams look for. So when they are, for example, analyzing logs or, observing patterns of a certain application or servers, they check at certain things. So for example, if they detect that there's abnormally high system response times, the system becomes very slow, which may means that a malware may be sort of piggybacking and using a lot of the memory and system resources. Anomalous system activity. So imagine one of the servers who shouldn't be talking to your database actually has opened a connection to your database. Okay, so things which are not normal. Presence of suspicious files or executables can also be an indicator of compromise. And very important, unusual outbound network activity. So whenever there is a security breach, usually as we discussed in the cyber kill chain, they try to exfiltrate data to a remote control and command station, or at least establish a communications channel, right? So if you see any outbound network activity to unknown destination domains or IPs, this is again a possible indicator of compromise. Abnormally high database reads is another significant indicator of compromise. So the way this works is that in order to identify something as abnormal, you first have to define something as being normal, right? Just to give you an example, let's say the IR team has conducted some research and they know on a given typical day, let's say there are reads and writes to a database which are roughly around 1 gigabytes, okay? And then one day they identified that there have been 20 gigabyte worth of reads from that database, okay? So that could possibly indicate some sort of data exfiltration attempt. So for all these activities or indicators of compromise, we usually have a baseline and we compare against that. So in identification, we review sources to check if a security event is an incident. And once we have done that, we try to classify the incident. Is it a malware infection? Is it a ransomware? It is a data breach? Then we collect indicators of compromise. These could be, for example, IPs of the systems that have been targeted in an organization, or IPs of remote control and command stations, file names, hashes. Now, this could potentially be done by, let's say, one member of the IR team, right, who basically identified something. And after classifying and collecting it, he may inform the other members of the team, basically escalate it. And then the team is supposed to document the incident in the incident log form. Documentation is very important, even though it may seem something of low priority as an attack is happening and you're trying to defend against it, but this becomes of paramount importance both for legal reasons as well as for later forensic investigations. It provides a clear paper trail of what happened, a timeline of events, okay? The next phase is containment. So in the containment phase, we basically have two different strategies. The first is short-term containment, which is, on the spot, immediately what needs to be done. So obviously, first is to isolate affected systems to prevent further spread. You may disable compromised accounts or credentials. For example, you identify that one of the sysadmin's accounts has been compromised. Obviously, the smart move would be to immediately disable it so that even if someone has illegal access to that, they wouldn't be able to cause further damage. And then you can block malicious IPs, domains, or other indicators of compromise at the firewall or endpoint level. Very important, you have to preserve volatile data. Let's say one of the servers in your organization has become compromised and you have identified, okay, that this server is being attacked by a ransomware, let's say, right? Now, the smart thing is not to immediately shut it off. It would seem to be the logical thing, a very tempting thing to do. But the thing is that in the memory of that server, there could be lots of information which could help, future forensic investigations. So the best way to deal with these things is to take possibly memory dumps of active processes and those kind of things before shutting down the system. So short-term containment was, right at the spot, right? But then we also have a relatively long-term. Short-term containment could be a matter of minutes or maybe a few hours. Long-term containment could be a couple of hours or a few days, okay? So you apply temporary fixes or patches to mitigate vulnerabilities. A lot of the times, some of these vulnerabilities or exploits are well known and well documented. And their solutions are maybe, to upgrade some of your software libraries or maybe patch something, okay? So you apply fixes. You segregate affected systems from production until remediation is complete. And you monitor for persistence mechanisms. Even though you think you have eradicated it, but still it would be nice to look for things like backdoors, registry changes, any new scheduled tasks. And you restrict unnecessary access to critical infrastructure. So you try to run in sort of a safe mode until you're absolutely sure that, the threat is no longer there. And obviously you need to increase logging and alerting so that you have increased visibility of your system. The next phase is the actual eradication, in which you try to actually eradicate the malware, backdoors, and malicious accounts. You scan your systems, applications, and databases to ensure there is no residual malware. And then you restore server systems and databases from safe backups. This is a very important point. If you're keeping your backups in the same place as your, for example, servers or, other stuff, then it's very likely that those could also be compromised. So that's what they say, never to put all your eggs in one basket. So usually what you want to have are regular backups, which are backed up to completely separate account or something completely disconnected from the current ecosystem. You may need to re-image applications and operating systems from trusted images. And then you need to inform relevant personnel about ongoing eradication activities. Now, relevant personnel in this case could be C-level management. And sometimes you also need to disclose this to government organizations or compliance authorities. So for example, in eradication, we remove the malware, right? But in recovery, we also need to consistently check again and again our infrastructure, databases, and applications so that there is no recurrence, right? We can be sure that it hasn't occurred again. We also need to validate the system state and data so that they are not compromised. We install patches and upgrades, and we document the recovery procedures that were performed. Last but not the least are the lessons learned. After an incident, it's critical to analyze why it happened and how to prevent it from occurring again. So every security incident has a root cause. It could be human error, for example, misconfigurations, weak passwords, or accidental data exposure. It could be a loophole in the security posture. So for example, missing patches or lack of access controls. It could be a flaw in a security system or product. It could be a zero-day vulnerability or maybe misconfigured firewall. So we need a detailed root cause analysis to understand what went wrong and what needs to be done to prevent a similar incident. Some of the approaches that are taken is obviously first to harden the security posture. So we need to implement better access controls, stronger authentication, and possibly encryption. Regularly conduct security assessments and penetration testing, patch and update systems to fix vulnerabilities. But we also need to streamline processes. So you have to keep on working and improving your incident detection and response workflows. After every incident, you may have identified some gaps or some miscommunications, some delays which could be improved. Something which is very critical to understand in this whole ecosystem is to provide regular security awareness trainings to reduce human errors. A lot of the time, security breaches are due to human errors. So by learning from past incidents, organizations can build a more resilient security posture and prevent future breaches.